Behind every legendary movie lies a story. Behind Apocalypse Now, there are dozens. Some involve impossible creative decisions. Others involve real injuries, financial ruin, and moments that could have ended the film forever. These are 15 unbelievable secrets behind one of Hollywood's greatest masterpieces. First, Martin Sheen nearly died during production. When filming began in the unforgiving jungles of the Philippines, Martin Sheen was under enormous physical and emotional pressure. Nearly every scene depended on him, and the exhausting schedule quickly took its toll. Then tragedy struck. At only 36 years old, Sheen suffered a massive heart attack while production was still underway. The situation became so serious that he had to be rushed away for emergency treatment, leaving the future of the film hanging by a thread. Francis Ford Coppola suddenly faced the terrifying possibility that his leading man might never return. Rather than canceling the project, the production quietly rearranged the schedule and continued filming scenes that didn't require Sheen, hoping he would recover. Months later, against all expectations, he returned to finish the role that would become one of the greatest performances of his career. Second, a real typhoon destroyed the entire set. Just as production began to regain momentum, Mother Nature delivered another devastating blow. Typhoon Olga swept through the Philippines with incredible force, flattening elaborate jungle sets, military bases, and expensive props that had taken months to build. Roads became impassable, equipment was damaged, and filming stopped completely. Hundreds of workers spent weeks rebuilding what had been lost. Every additional day meant higher costs, mounting frustration, and growing fears that the project would never be completed. Third, the movie almost never reached theaters. Originally planned as a relatively normal production lasting about 5 months, Apocalypse Now quickly spiraled out of control. One disaster followed another. Weather delays, equipment failures, scheduling problems, and constant script revisions turned a routine shoot into one of the longest productions in Hollywood history. What was supposed to be a single filmmaking journey stretched into well over a year. Industry insiders began predicting that the film would be abandoned before anyone ever saw it on the big screen. Fourth, Francis Ford Coppola risked his entire fortune. As expenses skyrocketed far beyond the original budget, studio executives grew increasingly nervous. But instead of walking away, Coppola made a decision few directors would ever dare. He mortgaged his own assets and personally guaranteed enormous loans just to keep production alive. If Apocalypse Now failed commercially, he wouldn't simply lose a movie. He could lose his home, his reputation, and everything he had spent years building. Few filmmakers have ever gambled so much on a single vision. Fifth, Marlon Brando shocked everyone on his first day. The cast and crew expected Hollywood legend Marlon Brando to arrive fully prepared for the role of Colonel Kurtz. Instead, he appeared significantly overweight and admitted he hadn't even read Heart of Darkness, the novel that inspired the character. Coppola had no choice but to completely rethink how Kurtz would be filmed. By hiding Brando in deep shadows and using carefully composed close-ups, he transformed a production problem into one of the most haunting and unforgettable character introductions in cinema history. Sixth, Harvey Keitel was originally Captain Willard. Long before audiences associated Martin Sheen with Captain Willard, the role belonged to Harvey Keitel. In fact, Keitel had already spent weeks filming in the Philippines, and several key scenes had been completed. But as production continued, Francis Ford Coppola became convinced that something wasn't working. He believed Keitel's performance felt too aggressive and too outwardly emotional for a character who was supposed to quietly observe the madness around him. Making the decision was incredibly expensive, but Coppola chose to replace him anyway. Entire sequences had to be discarded and filmed again with Martin Sheen, adding even more time and money to an already troubled production. Seventh, Martin Sheen's famous hotel breakdown was completely real. The unforgettable opening scene, where Captain Willard drinks alone in his hotel room before smashing a mirror, wasn't simply brilliant acting. Martin Sheen had been drinking heavily that day, and Coppola decided to keep the cameras rolling. During the emotional outburst, Sheen punched the mirror with enough force to shatter it, severely cutting his hand. The blood running down his arm wasn't makeup. It was real. Crew members wanted to stop filming immediately, but Sheen refused. He stayed in character, turning genuine pain into one of the most haunting openings ever captured on film. 8th. The helicopters kept disappearing in the middle of filming. One of Apocalypse Now's most spectacular sequences features dozens of military helicopters attacking a Vietnamese village while Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries blasts through the air. But filming those scenes was far more chaotic than audiences could imagine. The helicopters belonged to the Philippine military, and whenever real military operations demanded them, pilots simply flew away without warning. One moment they were performing dramatic attack formations for the movie, and the next they were responding to actual combat missions. The crew often had no idea when, or if, the aircraft would return, forcing production to stop repeatedly. 9th. Dennis Hopper barely followed the script. Dennis Hopper's eccentric photojournalist remains one of the film's most unforgettable characters because so much of what audiences see wasn't planned. Hopper frequently improvised his dialogue, speaking in rapid bursts of chaotic ideas that even his fellow actors struggled to follow. Rather than stopping him, Coppola embraced the unpredictability. The result was a character who felt completely unhinged, perfectly reflecting the psychological collapse at the heart of Apocalypse Now. 10th. The shocking buffalo sacrifice was absolutely real. The film's disturbing climax includes the ritual sacrifice of a water buffalo, and many viewers have assumed it was created with movie magic. It wasn't. The animal was sacrificed by members of a local indigenous community during an authentic ceremonial ritual. Coppola received permission to document the event and carefully incorporated the footage into the film's final sequence. By combining the real ceremony with Captain Willard's confrontation with Kurtz, he created one of the most powerful and controversial endings in cinema history. 11th. The script kept changing while the cameras were rolling. 11th. The script kept changing while the cameras were rolling. Most Hollywood productions lock the screenplay before filming begins. Apocalypse Now did the exact opposite. Francis Ford Coppola constantly rewrote scenes, altered dialogue, and even changed major story elements while the crew was already deep in the jungle. Some mornings, actors arrived without knowing exactly what they would be filming that day. Entire sequences were rewritten overnight, while others disappeared completely after weeks of preparation. Coppola later admitted that he was searching for the movie as he was making it, allowing the story to evolve naturally instead of forcing it to follow a fixed plan. It was a risky approach, but it gave the film its dreamlike, unpredictable atmosphere. 12th. Laurence Fishburne lied about his age to join the cast. Today, Laurence Fishburne is one of Hollywood's most respected actors, but Apocalypse Now became his first major film for an unbelievable reason. When auditions began, he was only 14 years old, far younger than the production wanted for the role of Mr. Clean. Determined not to miss the opportunity, Fishburne claimed he was 17. Amazingly, nobody questioned him. Because production dragged on for years, he had actually grown close to the age he originally claimed by the time filming finally wrapped. What began as a teenage lie ultimately launched one of the most successful acting careers in modern cinema. 13th. Francis Ford Coppola secretly appeared in the movie. Even if you've watched Apocalypse Now several times, there's a good chance you missed the director himself. During the famous helicopter assault sequence, Coppola makes a brief cameo as a television director standing near the battlefield. He can be heard shouting at the soldiers, telling them not to look at the camera and to keep moving as if the battle were real. It lasts only a few seconds, but it's one of the easiest hidden appearances to overlook. 14th. Coppola feared the film would destroy his life. As the production spiraled further out of control, the pressure became almost unbearable. Coppola wasn't just battling weather, budget problems, and exhausted actors. He was fighting his own fears. In later interviews, he admitted there were moments when he believed the movie would end his career and ruin him financially. The stress became so overwhelming that he even confessed to having dark thoughts during production. Few masterpieces have been created under such extraordinary emotional pressure. 15th. Coppola believed the production had become its own Vietnam War. After everything the cast and crew endured, Francis Ford Coppola delivered one of the most famous quotes in film history. My film is not about Vietnam. It is Vietnam. He wasn't comparing the story to the war. He was describing the experience of making it. Endless uncertainty, impossible conditions, exhaustion, confusion, and constant setbacks had transformed the production into a battle of its own. Ironically, those very struggles became part of Apocalypse Now's legend, proving that sometimes the greatest stories aren't just told on screen. They're lived behind the camera.